The GPS dot blinked red on my phone screen, showing my F-150 parked outside some shithole motel on the east side of town. 24 hours ago, it had been sitting in my driveway. Now, my son Marcus had sold it for whatever he could get, probably enough for a week's worth of whatever poison he was pumping into his veins these days. I sat in my wife's Honda in the motel parking lot, watching the door to room 237, where my truck's GPS signal originated. The LoJack system I'd installed 6 months ago, after Marcus had borrowed the truck twice without asking, was about to pay for itself in the worst possible way. I hoped I'd never need to use it to track down my own son. The motel was exactly what you'd expect: peeling paint, flickering neon sign missing half its letters, and the kind of place where people minded their own business because they had plenty to hide. My truck sat parked right in front of the room, still wearing the same dent in the tailgate from when Marcus had backed into our mailbox 3 years ago during his senior year of high school, back when his biggest problem was a C- in algebra. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda. "Any word? I'm worried sick." I typed back, found the truck, handling it. What I didn't tell her was that I'd been sitting here for 20 minutes trying to work up the nerve to get out of the car. At 52, I thought I'd figured out most of the hard parts of being a father. Teaching him to throw a curveball, explaining the birds and the bees, helping him through his first breakup, all that stuff seemed like a cakewalk compared to this. How do you confront your own son about stealing from you? How do you look at the kid you taught to ride a bike and accept that he's become someone who'd sell his father's truck for drug money? The door to room 237 opened and Marcus stepped out. Even from across the parking lot, I could see how thin he'd gotten. His Carhartt jacket, one I'd bought him for his birthday 2 years ago, hung loose on his frame like he was playing dress-up in his dad's clothes. His hair was longer than I'd seen it, greasy and unkempt, and he moved with that twitchy energy I'd learned to recognize over the past year. He wasn't alone. A woman followed him out, older than Marcus's 21 years, with bleached blonde hair showing dark roots and a face that looked like it had seen too much of whatever life this place offered. She said something to Marcus, gesturing toward my truck, and he shook his head. She laughed, a harsh sound that carried across the parking lot, and went back inside. Marcus walked to my truck and leaned against the driver's door, pulling out a cigarette. When had he started smoking? Another thing I didn't know about my own son. He cupped his hands around the lighter, and in that brief flare of flame, I saw his face clearly. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under his eyes, and skin with that grayish pallor that came from too many chemicals and not enough sleep. This was the same kid who used to help me work on cars in the garage every Saturday morning, who'd saved up his allowance for 3 months to buy me a socket wrench set for Father's Day when he was 12, who'd cried in my arms when our old dog Rex died, and who'd made me promise we'd always be a team, no matter what. I got out of the Honda and started walking across the parking lot. Marcus spotted me when I was about halfway there, and I watched his face cycle through surprise, guilt, and finally resignation. He didn't run, which surprised me. Maybe he was too tired, or maybe some part of him wanted to get caught. "Hey, Dad." He dropped the cigarette and ground it under his boot. "Marcus?" I stopped about 10 feet away, close enough to talk without shouting, far enough away to give us both some space. "Nice truck you got there." He almost smiled at that. Almost. "Yeah, well, I was gonna bring it back." "When?" "Soon, maybe next week." "Right after you spent whatever you got for selling it?" His jaw tightened. "I didn't sell it." "No? Then why am I standing in a motel parking lot at 10 o'clock on a Thursday morning? And why is my truck sitting here instead of in my driveway where I left it?" Marcus looked away, toward the traffic passing on the main road. A semi-truck downshifted, engine braking as it approached the stoplight, and the sound filled the silence between us. When he looked back, there was something different in his eyes. Older, harder. "I borrowed it. I had some things to take care of." "What kind of things, Marcus?" "Nothing you need to worry about." I felt my temper starting to rise, that familiar heat climbing up my neck. 20 years of marriage to Linda had taught me to recognize the warning signs, and 30 years in construction had taught me that losing your cool never made a situation better. But standing there, looking at my son, at what he'd become, I felt all those lessons slipping away. Nothing I need to worry about? I took a step closer. You steal my truck, disappear for a day and a half, and I find you at a crack motel on the worst side of town? Your mother's been crying herself to sleep for the past month, and you think I don't need to worry about anything? I'm not using anymore, Dad. I've been clean for… Bullshit. The word came out harder than I intended, and Marcus flinched like I'd slapped him. You look like hell, son. When's the last time you ate a real meal? When's the last time you slept in an actual bed instead of wherever the hell you've been sleeping? Marcus ran a hand through his greasy hair. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my son stole my truck to sell it for drug money. I wasn't going to sell it. No? Then what were you going to do with it? Another pause. Another semi-truck rumbling past. Marcus lit another cigarette with shaking hands, and I noticed the way he kept glancing toward the motel room door. I needed collateral, he said finally. Collateral for what? I owe some money to some people. Bad people, Dad. They gave me a week to come up with it, and that was 5 days ago. The heat in my chest turned cold. How much money? Doesn't matter. I'll figure it out. How much, Marcus? 3 grand. $3,000. More than I'd spent on his first car. More than we'd spent on his senior year of football equipment and class ring combined. I thought about the overtime hours I'd worked last month to replace the water heater. About Linda clipping coupons and shopping sales to stretch our grocery budget. $3,000 for what? Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. It matters to me. Marcus took a long drag off his cigarette. I made some bad choices. Got in deeper than I should have. With who? Nobody you know. Try me. Dad, just let it go, okay? This isn't your problem. Like hell it isn't. You're my son. You steal my truck, you make it my problem. The motel room door opened again, and the blonde woman stuck her head out. Everything okay out here, baby? Marcus waved her away without looking. It's fine, Denise. Give me a minute. Denise? I filed the name away, along with the way she called him baby, and the way Marcus didn't seem surprised by the familiarity. Another piece of my son's life I didn't know about. Who is she? I asked after Denise closed the door. A friend? What kind of friend lives in a place like this? The kind who lets me crash on her couch when I don't have anywhere else to go. You have somewhere to go. You have a home. You have a bed in the room where you grew up, with your baseball trophy still on the dresser and your high school graduation picture on the wall. That's not my home anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Why not? Because I'm not that kid anymore, Dad. I'm not your Little League MVP or your honor roll student. I'm not the son you wanted. You're wrong about that. Am I? When's the last time you looked at me without disappointment in your eyes? When's the last time you introduced me to someone without feeling embarrassed? I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong. But the truth was more complicated than that. Over the past year, as Marcus's problems had gotten worse, I had felt embarrassed. When neighbors asked how he was doing, when old friends from high school wanted to know about college plans, when Linda's sister asked why Marcus never came to family dinners anymore, I'd made excuses, changed the subject, found ways to avoid talking about my son. That doesn't mean I don't love you, I said. I know you love me, but loving someone and liking who they've become are two different things. A police cruiser drove slowly through the parking lot, the officer inside giving us a long look before continuing on. Marcus tensed until the car was out of sight. Who do you owe the money to, Marcus? It doesn't matter. It does to me. Why? So you can go have a talk with them? Explain that I'm a good kid who just made some mistakes? Maybe. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. These aren't the kind of people you can reason with, Dad. These aren't guys who care that you coached Little League or that you've never missed a day of work in your life. They care about money, and they care about getting paid on time. Then we'll get them their money. We? I'll loan you the 3,000. Marcus dropped his cigarette and stared at me. You don't have $3,000. I'll find it. How? You and Mom are already working overtime to pay for the new roof. You think I don't know you had to take money out of your retirement account to fix the furnace last winter? He was right, of course. Linda and I lived paycheck to paycheck, like most people we knew, juggling credit card payments and home repairs and trying to save a little for retirement. $3,000 might as well have been $30,000. I'll figure it out, I said. No, it's not up to you. I won't let you bail me out again. Again? When have I ever? The lawyer when I got arrested for possession, the money to fix the Henderson's fence after I crashed into it, the deposit for that apartment downtown that I never moved into, the rehab program that I walked out of after 2 weeks. I'd forgotten about some of those things, or at least I'd tried to forget. Each time, Linda and I had told ourselves it would be the last time. Each time, we'd believed Marcus when he promised to get his act together. That's different, I said. How? Because this time, if you don't pay, what happens? Marcus looked away again. They'll hurt me. How bad? Bad enough. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Marcus, who are these people? It doesn't matter. Stop saying that. Everything about this matters. No, it doesn't. Marcus' voice was getting louder, more agitated. Nothing I do matters anymore. I'm a junkie who steals from his family. I'm a disappointment who can't hold a job or stay clean or do anything right. What happens to me doesn't matter to anybody. It matters to me. Why? So you can fix me? So you can turn me back into the son you used to be proud of? I'm still proud of you. For what? Name one thing I've done in the past year that made you proud. I stood there in that motel parking lot, looking at my son, trying to come up with an answer. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, and I watched something die in Marcus's eyes. That's what I thought, he said. Marcus, keep the truck, Dad. I never should have taken it. He started walking toward the motel room, but I caught his arm. Up close, I could see track marks on his wrists, poorly hidden by the cuffs of his jacket. Don't walk away from me, I said. I'm not walking away. I'm trying to protect you. From what? From me. From the mess I've made. From the fact that your son is exactly the kind of person you taught me to avoid. You're not. I am, Dad. I steal from the people who love me. I lie to everyone who tries to help me. I associate with criminals and drug dealers and people who would hurt you without thinking twice about it. That's who I am now. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something I'd been refusing to see for months. He wasn't the confused kid who'd started experimenting with drugs in college. He wasn't the young man who'd gotten in over his head and needed his family's help getting out. He was a grown man who'd made a series of deliberate choices, and those choices had consequences that extended beyond just him. "Where are you going to get the money?" I asked. "I'll figure something out." "How?" "I don't know. Maybe I'll rob a convenience store. Maybe I'll steal something else to sell. Maybe I'll just disappear and hope they don't track me down." That's not an answer. It's the only answer I've got. I thought about Linda at home, probably pacing the kitchen floor and checking her phone every 5 minutes. I thought about the credit card bills stacked on my desk, about the overtime hours I'd need to work to pay for the roof repairs, about the retirement account that was already smaller than it should be. I thought about the phone call I'd get from the police when they found Marcus beaten to death behind some dumpster. I thought about the funeral where Linda and I would sit in the front row, wondering if we could have done more. "Get in the truck," I said. "What?" "Get in the truck. We're going home. We're going to sit down with your mother, and we're going to figure this out together. You don't understand. These people will get their money, one way or another." How? I didn't have an answer for that yet. All I knew was that I wasn't leaving my son in this parking lot, in this place, with these people. Whatever mistakes he'd made, whatever choices had led him here, he was still my son. He was still the kid who'd helped me build a treehouse in the backyard when he was 10, who'd insisted on camping in the living room during thunderstorms because he wanted to protect his little sister from the noise. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Dad, get in the goddamn truck, Marcus." Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he nodded and walked around to the passenger side. I followed him, digging my spare keys out of my pocket. As I opened the driver's door, the motel room opened again, and Denise stepped out. "Where you going, baby?" she called. Marcus rolled down his window. "I'll call you later." "You better. Tommy's been asking about you." Marcus went pale at the mention of the name. "Tell Tommy I'll have his money by tomorrow." "Tomorrow? Baby, you said that yesterday." "I mean it this time." Denise looked skeptical, but she shrugged. "Your funeral." As I started the truck and backed out of the parking space, I caught sight of Denise in the rearview mirror. She was already on her phone, talking to someone with animated gestures. Reporting in, probably. Letting whoever Tommy was know that Marcus was leaving with his father. "Who's Tommy?" I asked as we pulled onto the main road. "You don't want to know. Try me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out the passenger window at the strip malls and fast food restaurants sliding past. "He's the guy I owe money to." "What's his last name?" "Dad, please, just drop it." "His last name, Marcus. Castellanos." The name was familiar, but I couldn't place it immediately. Then it came to me. Newspaper stories from a few years back. Something about drug trafficking and money laundering. Federal indictments. A trial that ended with several people going to prison for long sentences. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Tommy Castellanos? You know him? I know about him. He's not someone you want to owe money to. No shit. We drove in silence for a while, past the industrial section of town where I'd worked construction jobs for most of my adult life. The crane at the Morrison building site was idle. Budget problems, according to the foreman. Another project delayed. Another few weeks without steady work. "How did you get involved with people like that?" I asked. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "How was it supposed to be?" "I just needed something to get through finals. Adderall, you know, to help me focus, pull some all-nighters. This kid in my dorm knew a guy who knew a guy. That was 2 years ago." "Yeah. So what happened?" Marcus rolled down his window and lit another cigarette. "I liked how it made me feel, alert, you know, like I could handle anything. So I kept buying it, even after finals were over." "Then what?" "Then I couldn't afford it anymore. Student jobs don't pay much, and pills are expensive. So the dealer, this guy named Rico, he said I could work off my debt." "What kind of work?" "Nothing serious at first, just delivering packages around campus. I told myself it was probably just more pills, maybe some weed, college stuff. But it wasn't? No, it wasn't. We were getting close to home now, passing the elementary school where Marcus had played youth football, the pizza place where we'd celebrated his 18th birthday, the intersection where I'd taught him to drive 5 years ago. All these landmarks of a normal childhood, a normal family life, that seemed like it belonged to different people now. "When did you drop out of school?" I asked. "Last semester. I kept telling you and Mom I was still going, but I'd stopped attending classes months before that." "Why?" "Because I was working for Rico full-time by then, making deliveries, collecting money from people who owed him. Good money, too. Better than anything I could make with a college degree." "So you just threw away your education?" "I threw away a lot of things." We pulled into our driveway, and I saw Linda peeking through the front window. She must have been watching for us, probably had been for hours. The relief on her face when she saw Marcus in the passenger seat was visible even from the street. "She's been worried sick," I said. "I know. She loves you. I know that too." "Then why do you keep hurting her?" Marcus finished his cigarette and flicked the butt out the window. "Because I can't help it. Because every time I try to get clean, to get my life together, something happens. I get stressed, or scared, or just bored, and I use again. And once I use, everything else falls apart." "What about rehab?" "I've been to rehab 3 times, Dad. It doesn't work if you don't want it to work." "And you don't want it to work?" "I want it to work. But wanting to want something isn't the same as actually wanting it. Linda was already opening the front door as we got out of the truck. She ran down the driveway and threw her arms around Marcus, holding him tight like she was afraid he might disappear again. "Oh, baby," she whispered. "I was so scared." Marcus hugged her back, and for a moment he looked like the son we remembered. Younger, softer, like the drugs and the stress and the bad decisions were just a costume he could take off. "I'm sorry, Mom." "Don't be sorry. Just come inside. I made coffee, and there's leftover pot roast in the fridge." We went inside, and Linda busied herself in the kitchen, heating up food and asking Marcus about whether he was warm enough, if he needed anything. It was her way of coping, taking care of people, making sure everyone was fed and comfortable. She'd done the same thing when her father was dying, when my brother lost his job, when the neighbor's house burned down. Marcus sat at the kitchen table where he'd done homework every night for 6 years, where we'd played board games and had family discussions and argued about curfews and car privileges. He looked small sitting there, diminished somehow, like the chair was too big for him. "So," Linda said, setting a plate of pot roast and mashed potatoes in front of Marcus, "what's the plan?" Marcus looked at me. I looked at Linda. Nobody had an answer. "The plan is we figure this out together," I said finally. "Figure what out?" Linda asked. I told her about the money Marcus owed, about Tommy Castellanos, about the deadline that was rapidly approaching. I watched her face cycle through shock, fear, anger, and finally the same grim determination I'd seen when she'd fought the insurance company over my back surgery, when she'd gone to bat for Marcus with his high school principal, when she'd refused to let the bank foreclose on our house during the recession. $3,000, she said. That's what he said. "By when?" Marcus said quietly. "Tomorrow." Linda sat down heavily in her chair. Okay, we can do this." "Linda, we can do this, Tom. We have some savings. There's the emergency fund. That's for emergencies." "What would you call this?" She had a point, but the emergency fund was barely $800, and that was supposed to cover us if the truck broke down or one of us got sick. "Even if we emptied savings, we'd still be short," I said. "Then we'll get a loan." "From who? The bank won't lend us money we can't pay back, and we're already maxed out on credit cards." "Then, well, figure something out." Marcus pushed his plate away, the food barely touched. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You guys don't have this kind of money. You'll put yourselves in debt trying to bail me out, and for what? So I can get clean for 6 months and then relapse again?" "You don't know that you'll relapse," Linda said. "Mom, I've relapsed 3 times already. The odds aren't exactly in my favor." "That's different. This time what? This time I'll really mean it? This time I'll have learned my lesson?" "That's what I said the last 3 times." Linda looked like he'd slapped her. "So, what are you saying? That we should just give up on you?" "I'm saying maybe you should cut your losses." "You're not a loss," I said. "You're our son. I'm a grown man who steals trucks and owes money to drug dealers. At what point do you stop trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved?" The kitchen got quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the clock above the stove. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the Hendersons' backyard, their voices high and carefree, normal sounds of a normal neighborhood where normal families were having normal problems. "Do you want to be saved?" Linda asked, finally. Marcus was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. I used to think I did, but now, I'm not sure. I remember what being saved would even look like." "It would look like this," Linda said, gesturing around the kitchen. "Sunday dinners and birthday parties and helping your dad with projects in the garage. It would look like having a job you don't hate and maybe a girlfriend who makes you happy, and conversations that don't revolve around how much money you need or what trouble you're in." "That sounds nice," Marcus said, "but I don't know if I'm capable of that kind of life anymore." "Why not?" "Because I've done things, Mom. Bad things. Things that normal people don't do." "Like what?" Marcus looked at me, then back at his mother. You really want to know? Yes. I've sold drugs to high school kids. I've collected debts from people who couldn't pay. And I didn't care that they had kids who needed food or medicine. I've stolen things from people who trusted me. I've lied to everyone who's ever tried to help me. Linda reached across the table and took his hand. That's not who you are. It's who I've become. Then become someone else. It's not that simple. Why not? Because once you cross certain lines, you can't uncross them. Once you become the kind of person who would steal his father's truck, you're always going to be that person. I thought about that for a moment. You know what I was doing when I was your age? Marcus looked up. Working construction? Before that, when I was 21, I was stealing cars. Both Linda and Marcus stared at me. In 25 years of marriage, I'd never told Linda about that period of my life. There had never been a reason to. You what? Linda said. I stole cars. For about 6 months, when I was between jobs and couldn't make rent, a friend of mine knew someone who would pay cash for certain models, no questions asked. Easy money, or so I thought. Dad, I had no idea. Nobody does, because I stopped before it caught up with me, and I never did anything like it again. But the point is, people can change. I went from being a car thief to being someone who's worked the same job for 20 years, who's been married to the same woman for 25, who's never even gotten a speeding ticket. That's different, Marcus said. How? Because you chose to change. I don't know if I can choose anything anymore. I don't know if I have any choices left. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. I opened it and read, "Your boy has 24 hours. After that, we come looking for him." I showed the message to Linda and Marcus. Marcus went even paler than he already was. "How did they get your number?" Linda asked. "Probably from Denise," Marcus said. "She saw us together at the motel." "What does this mean?" Linda asked. "It means they're serious," Marcus said. "And it means I need to figure out how to disappear for a while." "No," I said. "Dad, no. We're not running from this. We're not hiding from this. We're going to deal with it." "How?" I didn't have an answer yet, but I knew running wasn't it. I'd spent my whole life dealing with problems head-on, whether it was a difficult construction job or a tight budget or a marriage that needed work. You didn't run from problems, you solved them. "I'm going to call Tommy Castellanos," I said. "Dad, no, you don't understand." "Then explain it to me. These aren't reasonable people. You can't just call them up and work out a payment plan." "Maybe not, but I can try. And if they say no, then we'll figure out something else." Linda was looking back and forth between Marcus and me like she was watching a tennis match. "How do you even contact someone like that?" "I'll ask around. Someone will know someone." "Dad, this is crazy." "What's crazy is letting my son get hurt because he owes money to some criminal. What if they hurt you instead?" "They won't." "How do you know?" "Because I'm going to give them something they want more than money." "What's that?" "Information." Marcus looked confused. "What information?" "About Rico, about the operation he was running on campus, about the deliveries you made and the people you collected from." "Dad, I can't do that. Those people will kill me." "Not if they're in jail." "You want me to become an informant?" "I want you to help the police put drug dealers in prison where they belong." "And in exchange?" "In exchange, maybe Tommy Castellanos decides that the information is worth more than $3,000. Marcus was shaking his head. "You're talking about the federal government, Dad. FBI, DEA. These aren't campus security guards. If I cooperate with them, I become a target for every criminal I've ever worked with." "You're already a target." "But if I talk, if you talk, maybe you get a chance to start over somewhere else. Witness protection, new identity, clean slate, and leave you and Mom behind forever? If that's what it takes to keep you alive, then yes." Linda was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she listened to us plan our son's disappearance from our lives. But she didn't argue. She understood what I understood, that Marcus was going to disappear one way or another. The only question was whether it would be voluntary or permanent. "I need to think about this," Marcus said. "There's no time to think. We have less than 24 hours. "I know, but what? If I do this, if I cooperate with the feds, there's no going back. My life as Marcus Davidson is over." "Your life as Marcus Davidson is already over," I said. "The question is whether you want to have a life as someone else." Marcus stood up from the table and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where he'd played as a child. The swing set was still there, though he'd outgrown it years ago. The treehouse we'd built together was showing its age, some of the boards warped and weathered. "I wanted to be a teacher," he said quietly. "What?" Linda asked. "When I was a kid, I wanted to be a high school history teacher. Coach football maybe. Have summers off to spend with my own kids." "You can still do that," Linda said. "No, I can't. Teachers have to pass background checks. They can't have criminal records. So we'll figure out a way to clear your record." "Mom, it doesn't work like that." "Then we'll figure out something else. There are other careers." Marcus turned around to face us. "Don't you get it? This isn't about careers. This is about the fact that I'm never going to be the person you wanted me to be. I'm never going to give you grandchildren or make you proud or be someone you can talk about without feeling ashamed." "I'm not ashamed of you," I said. "You should be." "Well, I'm not." "Why not?" I thought about that question. Why wasn't I ashamed of Marcus? He'd stolen from us, lied to us, disappointed us more times than I could count. He'd thrown away opportunities that Linda and I had worked hard to give him. He'd associated with criminals and made choices that put himself and our family at risk. But looking at him standing there in our kitchen, thin and scared and desperate, all I could think about was the kid who'd insisted on helping me paint the garage when he was 8 years old, even though he'd gotten more paint on himself than on the walls. The teenager who'd worked 2 summer jobs to save money for college. The young man who'd called home every Sunday his first semester, homesick and wanting to hear familiar voices. "Because you're still my son," I said finally. "Because somewhere under all the bad choices and the drugs and the fear, you're still the kid who used to fall asleep in my lap during Sunday afternoon football games. Because being your father is still the best job I've ever had, even when it's the hardest." Marcus started crying then. Not the quiet tears Linda had been shedding, but deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere he'd been keeping locked away for months. Linda got up and put her arms around him, and I joined them, the 3 of us holding each other in our kitchen like we were trying to keep something precious from slipping away. We stood like that for a long time, until Marcus's crying subsided and the afternoon light began to fade outside the window. Finally, Marcus pulled back and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "Okay," he said, "let's do it." "Do what?" Linda asked. "Call the FBI, set up a meeting, see if they're interested in what I know." "Are you sure?" I asked. "No, but I'm sure about what happens if we don't try." I spent the next hour on the phone, calling people who might know how to contact the right federal agents. It took 6 calls and 3 transfers, but finally I was connected to Special Agent Sarah Chen with the Drug Enforcement Administration. "Mr. Davidson," she said when I explained the situation, "this is highly unusual. Typically, informants come to us through lawyers or are recruited during the course of an investigation." "My son doesn't have time for typical," I said. "He owes money to Tommy Castellanos, and the deadline is tomorrow." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Tommy Castellanos? You know him?" "We've been trying to build a case against him for 2 years. What kind of information does your son have?" "He worked for a dealer named Rico who was connected to Castellanos. He made deliveries, collected debts, saw the operation from the inside." "For how long?" "About a year." Another pause. "Can you bring your son in tonight? I'd like to hear what he has to say." "What about his safety?" "If his information is as valuable as you think it is, we can discuss protective measures." "Witness protection?" Let's start with a debriefing and see where we go from there. I hung up and looked at Marcus and Linda. We have a meeting at 8 o'clock tonight. Where? Marcus asked. Federal building, downtown. I've never been inside a federal building. Neither have I. Linda made sandwiches, none of us ate, and we sat around the kitchen table as the sun set outside our window. The normal sounds of our neighborhood continued around us, dogs barking, lawnmowers running, kids being called inside for dinner. Life going on as usual while our world was falling apart. At 7:30, we drove downtown in my truck, the same truck that had started this whole crisis. Marcus sat in the passenger seat, bouncing his leg nervously and chain-smoking cigarettes with the window cracked. Linda was in the back seat, quiet and pale. The federal building was an imposing concrete structure that took up an entire city block. Security guards, metal detectors, and the kind of atmosphere that made you feel guilty even if you hadn't done anything wrong. We were escorted to a conference room on the 4th floor where Agent Chen was waiting with another agent, a tall man with graying hair who introduced himself as Agent Rodriguez. Marcus, Agent Chen said, before we begin, I want you to understand that anything you tell us tonight could be used in future prosecutions. You're not under arrest and you're free to leave at any time, but I recommend you have a lawyer present. We can't afford a lawyer, I said. If your son decides to cooperate, we can arrange for a public defender. Marcus looked at me, then at Linda. I don't need a lawyer. I want to tell you everything. And he did. For the next 3 hours, Marcus laid out the entire operation as he'd seen it. Names, dates, locations, amounts of money, and drugs. The distribution network that reached from Tommy Castellanos down through middle-level dealers like Rico to street-level pushers selling to college kids. The laundering operations that funneled drug money through legitimate businesses. The enforcement structure that kept everyone in line through fear and violence. Agent Chen took notes and asked questions, her pen moving constantly across her legal pad. Agent Rodriguez operated a digital recorder, occasionally asking Marcus to repeat something or spell a name. This Rico, Agent Chen said, you have his full name? Ricardo Vasquez. He lived in an apartment complex on Maple Street, Building C, Unit 14. Lived. He moved out about a month ago. Word was he was moving up in the organization, getting his own territory to run. Any idea where? I heard Chicago, but I'm not sure. What about his suppliers? Who was he getting product from? Tommy's people. There was this guy named Eddie Morales who would make deliveries to Rico every Tuesday. Always drove a different car, but always came alone. You saw these deliveries? I was there for probably a dozen of them. Rico liked having muscle around when he was handling that much product. Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. How much product are we talking about? Depended on the week, but usually somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 worth. Cocaine, heroin, pills, weed. Rico ran a full-service operation. And you helped distribute this? Marcus nodded. I made deliveries to smaller dealers around campus, collected money from people who owed Rico. Sometimes I'd sit in on meetings with new dealers who wanted to work for him. These meetings, Agent Chen said, where did they take place? Usually at this bar called Murphy's on the south side. Rico had a standing reservation in the back room every Thursday night. Murphy's Bar on Henderson Street? That's the one. Agent Chen and Agent Rodriguez exchanged a look. We've had that place under surveillance for 6 months, Rodriguez said. But we could never get anyone inside. Rico's careful about who he brings to those meetings, Marcus said. But if you could get me in there. Absolutely not, I said. I'm not letting my son go undercover. Mr. Davidson, Agent Chen said, I understand your concerns, but Marcus might be our best chance to get inside this organization. And what happens when they figure out he's working with you? What happens when Tommy Castellanos finds out his money problems have turned into federal problems? We'd take precautions. What kind of precautions? Wire surveillance, backup teams, extraction protocols. You're talking about my son, not some professional informant. Dad, Marcus said quietly, Maybe this is what I need to do. No, we came here to get you into witness protection, not to turn you into bait. But if I can help them, you've already helped them. You've given them more information in 3 hours than they've gathered in 6 months of surveillance. Agent Chen closed her notepad. Let me make some calls, see what kind of deal we can work out. She and Agent Rodriguez left the conference room, leaving the 3 of us alone with our thoughts and a lukewarm pot of coffee. Through the window, I could see the lights of the city spreading out below us. Normal people living normal lives without having to worry about drug dealers or federal investigations or sons who'd lost their way. "How are you feeling?" Linda asked Marcus. "Scared. Relieved. I don't know. Relieved. It feels good to tell the truth for once, to not have to lie or make excuses or pretend everything's okay." "You could have told us the truth anytime," I said. "When was the last time we had a conversation about anything other than what I'd done wrong or how disappointed you were?" He had a point. Over the past year, as Marcus' problems had gotten worse, our relationship had devolved into a series of confrontations. Me trying to fix him resisting my efforts, both of us getting frustrated and angry. "I'm sorry about that," I said. "It's not your fault, Dad. I gave you plenty of reasons to be disappointed." Agent Chen returned 40 minutes later with a thick folder and a serious expression. "I've spoken with my supervisor and the U.S. Attorney's Office. Here's what we can offer." She spread several documents across the conference table. "Full immunity for your past crimes in exchange for your cooperation. Relocation assistance through the U.S. Marshals Witness Security Program. New identity, financial support for 6 months while you get established, ongoing protection as long as there's a credible threat." "What kind of cooperation?" I asked. "Continued debriefing sessions to document everything Marcus knows about the organization, testimony in future trials, possibly some controlled undercover work, depending on how the investigation develops." "Undercover work?" "Nothing dangerous. Monitored phone calls, maybe wearing a wire to a meeting or two. We wouldn't put him in any situation we couldn't control." Marcus looked at the documents, then at Linda and me. "What about the money I owe Tommy?" "That becomes our problem," Agent Chen said. "We'll make it clear to Mr. Castellanos that you're under federal protection and that any retaliation would be considered obstruction of justice." "You think that'll stop him?" "Tommy Castellanos is a businessman first and a criminal second. He's not going to risk a federal investigation over $3,000. And if you're wrong, then you'll be somewhere he can't find you." Linda reached across the table and took Marcus's hand. "It's your choice, honey." Marcus stared at the documents for a long time. Finally, he picked up the pen Agent Chen offered him. "Where do I sign?" The next few hours were a blur of paperwork and procedures. Marcus signed cooperation agreements and waiver forms. A U.S. Marshal explained the witness protection process and what Marcus could expect over the next few weeks. A psychologist conducted a brief evaluation to assess his mental fitness for the program. By the time we left the federal building, it was past midnight. Marcus would be staying in a safe house until his new identity could be arranged, which meant this might be the last time Linda and I saw our son for months, possibly years. We stood in the parking lot next to my truck, none of us wanting to say goodbye. "I'll call when I can," Marcus said. "They said you couldn't have contact with us," Linda said. "Not directly, but they said I could send messages through Agent Chen. Let you know I'm okay." "What will you tell people about your new life?" I asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe I'll say I'm from Ohio, that my parents died in a car accident, something like that." The thought of my son telling people we were dead hit me harder than I expected, but I understood why he'd have to do it. Marcus Davidson was disappearing, and whoever he became would need a believable backstory. "I'm proud of you," I said. "For what?" "For doing the right thing, for choosing to help instead of run." "I'm not sure it's the right thing. I'm not sure there is a right thing anymore." "There is, and you found it." Linda hugged Marcus tight, and I saw her whisper something in his ear. He nodded and hugged her back, and for a moment they both started crying again. Then it was my turn. I put my arms around my son, and he felt smaller than I remembered, thinner and more fragile. But he also felt stronger somehow, like he'd found something inside himself that had been missing for a long time. "I love you," I said. "I love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself." "I will. And remember, this isn't the end of your story. It's just a new chapter." Marcus stepped back and wiped his eyes. "What if I screw this up too?" "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're stronger than you think, because you've got good people helping you now, and because you're my son, and I don't raise quitters." A black SUV pulled into the parking lot, Marcus's ride to the safe house. Agent Chen got out of the passenger seat and walked over to us. "Ready?" she asked. He looked at Linda and me one more time. "Yeah, I'm ready." Marcus got into the SUV, and we watched it drive away into the night. Linda and I stood there in the empty parking lot for a long time, holding each other and trying to process what had just happened. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Linda asked. "I think we did the only thing we could do." "What if we never see him again? Then we'll know he's alive and safe somewhere, starting over. Is that enough?" I thought about that question as we drove home through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. Was it enough to know our son was alive and safe if we couldn't be part of his life? Was it enough to save him if it meant losing him? By the time we pulled into our driveway, I had an answer. "It has to be enough," I said, "because it's all we've got." Linda nodded and squeezed my hand. "I just want him to be happy." "He will be. It might take time, but he'll figure it out." "How do you know?" "Because he's got a second chance. How many people get that?" We went inside and sat in our kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd planned Marcus' escape just hours earlier. The house felt different now, quieter and emptier. Not just because Marcus was gone, but because the crisis that had consumed our lives for so long was finally over. Over the next few weeks, Agent Chen called periodically with updates. Marcus was doing well in the safe house. His debriefing sessions were providing valuable intelligence. The investigation into Tommy Castellanos was moving forward. 3 months later, we got our first indirect message from Marcus through Agent Chen. He was settled in his new location, had enrolled in community college under his new identity, and was working part-time at a bookstore. He was clean, healthy, and optimistic about the future. Linda cried when Agent Chen read us that message. Happy tears for the first time in longer than I could remember. 6 months after that, we got another message. Marcus had transferred to a 4-year university and was majoring in education. He'd met a girl named Sarah who made him laugh. He was thinking about getting a dog. A year later, Marcus had graduated with honors and was student teaching at a high school in his new city. He and Sarah were engaged. He wanted us to know that he thought about us every day and that he was grateful for the sacrifice we'd made to give him a second chance. Linda and I read that message together in our kitchen, and I thought about all the conversations we'd had at this table over the years. The homework sessions and family meetings, the arguments about curfews and college plans, the crisis that had brought us here. "He's going to be a teacher," Linda said, smiling through her tears. "Just like he wanted to be when he was a kid." "Do you think he'll ever come home?" I looked around our kitchen, at the pictures on the refrigerator and the coffee mugs in the sink and all the small details of the life we'd built together. Then I thought about Marcus in his new city, building a new life with new dreams and new possibilities. "He is home," I said, "just not the same home we knew." Linda nodded and leaned against my shoulder. Outside, the Hendersons' kids were playing in their backyard again, their voices high and carefree. Normal sounds of a normal neighborhood where normal families were having normal problems. But maybe normal was overrated. Maybe what mattered wasn't whether your life looked like everyone else's, but whether you fought for the people you loved when they needed you most. Maybe what mattered wasn't whether you got the ending you wanted, but whether you got the ending that allowed everyone to keep growing. The GPS tracker in my truck blinked steadily in the driveway, exactly where it was supposed to be. And somewhere across the country, my son was building a life I'd never see, but would always be proud of. It wasn't the story I'd planned to tell about my family, but it was the story we'd lived, and in the end, that had to be enough.